is a Grimm TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hey Boo. I'm Jackie.
Hello.
I'm Jason.
I can't.
Hi,
I'm
Jason.
I'm Chrissy. Jason's in the background.
Crystal.
How y'all doing How y'all doing today? Y'all had a great week?
Oh, there he is.
Yeah,
There he
it's
is.
okay.
Hi.
Hola.
That's the fifth Hey Boo girl.
I'll put him in a bow. I'll put a big bow in his
Okay.
hair.
All right. You would have to sit here with a bow in his hair and talk.
He would. He wouldn't care.
So how was your week? Y'all had a good week? Yes.
Not bad.
Yeah, it was
Not bad.
okay. It was okay. It was okay. So today's show's
okay.
on the Grimm fairy tales, right?
Yes.
I guess they're like what? Like scary fairy tales? Is that what they are?
The Grimm fairy tales are hype.
Would you shut up? I love you, but be quiet.
Stories, actually, there are stories that were written in 1812 by the Grimm brothers. But what they tried to do is they didn't actually write the stories. These stories go back, like some of them are dated 6,000 years old. They just tried to preserve like the history and the folk telling and the different stories that were passed down. And so yeah, they're kind of dark. Some of them are really creepy and twisted and dark. They're not the fairy tales that we like, the Disney fairy tales that we see for sure.
We have the dark ones that we can watch, or we have the nice ones we can watch, correct?
Yeah, if you watch the newer renditions of them, they've really lightened them up, right? And they've made them all really, I don't know, really fun and princessy. And the fact is that the original fairy tales were not that way at all.
So how did they do that? Because what, in the 18th century they didn't have no television, so you had to read it.
Yeah, they wrote the
like
book, but they were stories. There were stories passed down vocally throughout the years. So like we would maybe look at them as what we have now as urban legends,
Folklore.
tales. Yeah, folklore that was passed down that they just tried to preserve in the written form. So that's how the fairy tale book first came about.
I think he's talking about Jason earlier.
Yes, Jason. Everybody's saying hi to Jason.
I know. He's so loved.
He makes an appearance every time, doesn't he?
He
Yes,
does.
Shows the love.
Every show. Every show.
That's why I think you should put him in a bow and let him sit next to you.
Hi, Steven.
Steven.
Hi, everybody else.
So what are some of the tales? I mean, what were some of them that's Grimm stories?
There's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chrissy, do you have one you want to talk about first?
Well, I mean, I like several of them. So And like she said, it's kind of loosely based on some of the Disney stories, like Cinderella, like Snow White, you know. But even if you look at the Disney version, like we read it now, the concept is still there and the darkness still exists within the
Yeah.
story. I mean, you know, you have an evil stepmother who is so jealous of her stepdaughter because she's not the prettiest in the land anymore, and she tells whoever it was, her servant or whatever, to go kill her and bring her back the heart.
And the liver. Yeah. To prove.
Correct. And he did. Well, he didn't. He told her he did, but he took an animal heart and he brought it to her. She cooked it and she ate it, and she thought it was her heart, but it wasn't, because he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't kill this young, beautiful, innocent princess girl because her stepmother was jealous. So, I mean, it's just it's reality of any basic fairy tale if you really dive into the story and what it's saying. Even nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes can be super, super dark if you
They are.
really think about what they're saying.
They are. And we sang them to our kids to sing them.
I know.
Like
I
Bonnie?
know. Like
Like
Rock My
Bonnie?
Baby.
So when I was growing up, my dad actually read the Grimm's fairy tales to me. I didn't get the Disney version. I got the Grimm's and then the Christian Andersen, which isn't much better. And so Cinderella, let's talk about Cinderella for just a minute, because that is such a cool like life after death story, actually, when you think about it. So we think about Cinderella and her fairy godmother, right? But it wasn't her fairy godmother, it was actually her mother. She when her mother died, let's back up. When her mother died, the last words that she said to her were, I will be with you always. I will look after you always. Basically, be a good girl. God's going to look out for you, and I'm always going to be with you. And so when Cinderella's father remarries, he's a rich man, and he goes into town one time and he asks the two stepsisters and Cinderella, what would you like me to bring you? And of course, the stepsisters, they want jewelry and gold and clothes. And Cinderella asked for a twig. She said, I want the first twig that touches your shoulder on your ride there. So he brings that back to her and she plants it at her mother's grave. And she waters it with her tears. And it grows into a tree. And this is where she sits vigil. Birds come out of this tree. And that really is her fairy godmother. So when she goes and sits by the tree asking for the dress, these birds come and they dress her. Now, these birds are not, they're not the little woodland creatures, right? That help the lonely girl do the chores either. They're freaking vicious. They're really, really good to her. But at the end of the story, in the Grimm's story, the actual fairy tale, they're very vicious. They peck out the eyes of the stepsisters and leave them blind, as in, I guess, their karma, for their wicked deeds. So it's interesting because they live in that tree that she planted at her mother's grave. So when we see the version, we see the, cute fairy godmother. It's actually her mother.
Wow.
That's where that came from. So they're really interesting. I find them to be like fascinating.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
All of them are really like Jen was saying, all of them really have that contrast in them.
Right.
So if you ever get the opportunity, if you don't have the book, you can always get the ebook. You can always go to YouTube. I think YouTube has the whole series audibly, somebody reading the Grimm's fairy tales. So, and to me, that's a little more exciting, because then that takes you, if it's a good, reader, but it takes you back into the era and time frame of sitting around in the classroom or, campfire or whatever, hearing stories being told, because that's basically the setting that these stories are derived from.
Yeah. The other creepy thing in the Cinderella story is that when those sisters go to try on the shoe, in the actual story, the stepmother, she wants them to be, she wants one of them to be the queen so bad that she literally tells the eldest, because she tries on the shoe first. She's like, yeah, just cut off your toes so it'll fit. When you're a queen, you don't need your feet. You have a carriage. Like, you're fine. Cut off your toes. And she does. And she sticks her foot in the slipper. Wow. And when the prince carries her away, they have to pass this grave of the mother and this tree. And the birds whisper to him. They say, look in the slipper. Look at the dripping blood. Like, this is a falsehood. And so he does. He takes her back. And then the younger sister, the mother says the same thing, except cut off your heel. And so she does. She literally chops it off for it to fit in the shoe. And again, they go by the grave of the mother, and the birds come and they whisper to him. I mean, what a dumb prince, right? Like, they say, look in the shoe, there's blood. I mean, they're just really dark and really crazy. Yeah, they're not super nice.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, see, I've never really read any of them. The only, only way I ever seen any of them was through Disney. And, there's always a good, happy ending to it. And just from listening, I'm assuming that there was not always a happy ending to these
Correct.
fairy tales.
No, there wasn't.
So now I'm really, really intrigued by these. So I'm actually going to have to listen to them. I mean, I try to do a little bit of research on them, but it's just been a crazy week, and I didn't get to do a whole lot. But now I'm really intrigued to see what the actual endings of these fairy tales are compared to what Disney has portrayed.
Yeah, they're very interesting. The oldest one that they could date back was called, how to remember, I think The Smith and the Devil. And so it's about a blacksmith, and they say that this is a 6,000-year-old story. He makes a pact with a malevolent being. I mean, they're calling it in some renditions of the book, either the devil or a demon or a sorcerer or whatever. And he makes a pact with him. And that's what the story is about. And like, we have to remember that these are actual folk stories that have been passed down. So like, these kind of things have been going on for years and years and years. And these really are stories about witchcraft and the paranormal, light and dark, from 6,000 years ago, which is fascinating to me.
So way back then, they were still talking about paranormal and
absolutely.
Evil. Wow,
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and something else too, you have to kind of think about, even with like urban legends or things like that, they originated from something that happened that was possibly similar. And of course, it's been added on to throughout the generations and years. And so, but there had to be a beginning for those stories to start. So like Jennifer was saying with the blacksmith and the devil, did somebody see him change? You know what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm, trying to say here as far as how did that story come about?
Right. There is a story called The Godfather that I find very, very interesting. And it's one of those things where I wonder, where did this originate? Like, there has to be, I realize it's embellished and it changes over the years. And we put our own interpretation to it as stories go. But he made a pact basically with death for his child. He had 12 children, which is ridiculous anyway, that he could barely feed. And when he went to have the 13th child, he was afraid because he didn't know how he was going to take care of the child. So he went out onto the street to find the first godfather that he could, to please, help take care of and raise this child. So first of all, he comes up onto God, and God says, like, I'll take care of your child for you. And he says, oh, you're God? No, you're not fair. You give to the rich and you take from the poor. I don't want you to be the godfather. So then he comes up on the devil. The devil says the same thing, like, let me take your child. Let me take care of your child for you. He says, no. You sway men and you're wicked and you trick people. I don't want you to do that. So then he comes up on death, and death says, let me be the godfather to your child. And he says, you know what? Yeah, you can be. You treat everybody equally. Now, that's powerful. Like when I read that, I just got the chills. He says, yes, you are equal. You take everybody in. You can be the godfather to my child. And so they go through the whole christening, death holds the child. And he promises him, he says, I will make you famous. You will have a good life, but you are mine. So when this child reaches age, death comes to him and says, I'm going to make you a famous physician. Follow me into the woods. And he shows him an herb. He says, here's the thing. When I am at somebody's head, you may give them this herb, they will live. Or maybe it's the other way around. When I'm at their feet, when I am at their head, you may not. They are mine. And you may not cross me. If you cross me, you will come with me. So he uses this herb, and he does. He becomes very famous. He becomes very well-known physician. He can heal the sick. Then the king gets sick, and he feels kind of bad, right? Because death says no, he can't have the herb. And he says, well, I'm going to cheat death just this one time. He's going to forgive me because he's my godfather. So I'm going to do it. So he heals the king. And death does forgive him. He says, you're not going to get another chance. Don't do it again. So then the king's daughter becomes very, very ill, the princess. And the king says, whoever can heal her may marry her and become the king and have the kingdom. So, of course, the doctor goes in, right? And death says no. Well, he can't get past the fact that if he does heal her, he's going to be the king. He's going to have all of this power. He's going to be very, very rich. He can't see that he already has a lot of power and that he's already doing very well. His greed comes to him and he wants more and more and more. So he heals her. And death doesn't forgive him that time. Death does not forgive him. Death takes him down into a cave where there are candles burning. And he says, what are these candles? And he says, they are the light of men's lives. I decide when they go out. And he says, well, can you show me which one is mine? And death takes him to one that's just barely burning, right? It's just barely burning. And he says, well, can you light that bigger? What's happening? And he says, no, I can't. Another one has to go out for me to light, for another one to light, right? So basically, I mean, in the end, death tricks him and death snuffs out his candle and he dies. So they're just very interesting stories. And they just give me, and I can't tell them as good as they're written. But
if you think about it, Jen, it's truly, it's not just a story. It's not even just a legend, because if you think about all these stories that we're talking about, like the one you just even told, it's a life lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about integrity. It's about honesty. It's about loyalty. It's about, you have to keep your word.
Yes.
Your word is your honor.
And I think it also, what really hit me was, it's also about this grab for power and fame and more money, and not being able to see like what you already have and going for more and more and more. And eventually it just takes over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that story is really, really interesting to me. There's just some crazy ones, but again, they're very, very old. They originate from somewhere. So this line of thinking has been with us for thousands of years.
Right.
Thousands.
Right.
Which is just crazy to me. Crazy cool.
It is crazy cool. And like I said, being a life lesson, I think, is just something that is in each of the stories individually.
Yes. Yeah. Did you happen to read The Juniper Tree?
I have read that. I didn't today, but I have read that because I actually have the Grimm's fairy tale book.
Yeah.
And I've also watched somebody read it vocally on YouTube before, but I didn't do that today. But if you want to talk about it, go right ahead.
It's very, very creepy. Have either one of you read it? The Juniper Tree?
I never read no Grimm stories. I mean, I was looking them up, and there's a lot of them, like what y'all said, Cinderella, Rapunzel,
Right.
and stuff like that they talked about and mentioned why they're so grim. but to hear that one, no.
Good names, right?
Yeah. I was like, man, I grew up on that. How could that be bad? Oh my God.
The juniper tree also, I mean, it's dark. It's really dark. But again, it talks about life after death, and it talks about karma, and it talks about like avenging things from the spirit world. It's absolutely this insane story of this little boy who is his mother dies in childbirth with him, and she had wanted to have this child so bad, and she ended up dying in childbirth. So there's a tree, a juniper tree. Again, here we go with the tree, right? So there's this tree.
Tree of life.
Yes, there's this tree that grows where she's buried. The father eventually remarries and has a daughter. And the stepmother, we have wicked stepmothers always. Like, they're always wicked stepmothers. But again, we come to grief. The stepmother did not want this child. She didn't love this child, and she abused him horribly. And she also wanted her daughter to be the sole heir to all of the father's things. So she plans to kill this child. He comes home from school one day, and she says, asks him if he would like an apple. And these apples are in a trunk. They're in a big, heavy trunk with a steel lid. And he's surprised because she never does this. And he says, yes, I would like to have an apple. And she says, well, go get one out of the trunk. So he goes into the trunk, and as he does to get the apple, she slams it on his head and decapitates him.
Wow.
And then she panics. And she says, oh, shit, I just killed him. Now what am I going to do? She takes a handkerchief and secures his head back onto his body and props him up in the corner in a chair. When the sister, her daughter, comes home from school, she says, brother's looking kind of bad. Like, I don't know what's going on. He doesn't look well. Right?
I'm sure he was pretty blue or
Yeah,
gray.
she says he just doesn't look well. What's up? And the mother says, I don't know. Go over there and try to talk to him. If he doesn't talk, knock him upside the head, and you'll get a reaction. And so sister goes and does this, and of course his head falls off, right? So sister is distraught that she has literally just knocked the head off of her brother and killed him. And mother manipulates her to believe that, yes, she did kill him.
Wow.
And then they devise this plan. Mother devises this plan. She says, well, Dad's going to be home, and we got to do something. So we're going to tell him that the boy ran away. And she proceeds to cook him, to dispose of him. So she cooks him, and she feeds him to the father for dinner. I mean, you guys, it's ridiculous gross. I mean, it's just weird. And so the dad's eating, and then he throws the bones on the floor. The sister's feeling really bad. She picks them up, and she goes and buries them under this tree by his mother. And this is where all of this paranormal stuff begins to happen. He turns into a bird. This tree just grows huge, and the branches split, and out of it comes like a mist, and there's a fire in the middle of it. And out of this fire, this bird comes, which is this little boy. And he can sing. So he goes around and he sings, and the song he sings is telling the story. I don't know the song by heart, but it's something like, my mother killed me, my father ate me, my sister buried me, but I'm still here, kind of thing. Like, he's telling his story just as spirits do, right? He rose up and he wants his story told. So he goes around and he sings all these songs, and he gets gifts because he can sing so well. He gets a gold chain. He gets red shoelaces. And then he gets a millstone, a big rock. And he flies to his home, and he begins singing. And the mother kind of freaks out. She realizes something's not right. She won't come out and listen to the song. But the dad does. And he drops the gold chain around the dad's neck as a gift. The sister comes out. He drops her the red shoelaces. The stepmother finally comes out, and he throws the stone on her and kills her. as he's singing this song. Like he avenges his own death in the spirit form of a bird. It's an amazing, like, it's just a crazy story.
It is crazy. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, it is. But again, it's the whole. Have you noticed the going theme
Yes,
typically is a stepmother?
yes,
Have
And
you noticed that?
apples. And
yes,
apples.
and birds and
Mhm.
trees.
Yep.
Like,
Stepmother's death, eating body parts,
yeah,
and then karma coming back to haunt.
right,
Yes.
I'm
yes,
just
Wow.
saying.
yes.
I'm just saying.
And the farthing talks about coins too, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
That story talks about a ghost with coins.
Wow.
I mean, and they date back. So, I mean, just crazy.
Somebody in the audience said, check out Devil's Bridge Falls. Is that one of the Grimm's fairy tales? I'd have to pull out my book.
That was David Hope said that.
Is that a fairy tale?
Tourist
Yeah,
attraction in
Paul
Wales.
was talking about nursery rhymes, and we were talking about them as well, being dark as well.
So what nursery rhymes are dark? Just for curiosity.
Just about all of them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, think about the words like
So-
Rockabye Baby or
Never said no.
no what?
No, it's not.
It's not a fairy tale.
yeah.
I'll have to check it out, David.
I'm on it right now. Um, this is talking about the loss of the Queen.
Yes, it's from Wales.
Nature Trail, waterfalls, and 3 bridges. Ooh, I love waterfalls. Nature trails are great as long as the bugs don't carry you away.
Yes.
So, Chrissy, did you say that you read the Robber Bridegroom?
Yeah, vaguely. I recall it. Yes. Let's see. I'm sorry, I was looking at the pretty waterfalls. Is that where they
Well, it's the same
promised?
thing.
Go
Go ahead, Chrissy. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like Ring Around the Rosies.
Yeah.
That is a very popular one whenever you're in school and I mean, Ring Around the Rosies, Pocket Full of Posies, Ashes, Ashes, We All Fall Down. I mean, that one's dark, just
Wasn't
as
that,
another example.
I can't remember, but
I
was
didn't
that
consider
nuclear
that
war?
one dark. I never
Ashes,
considered
We
that.
All Fall Down. That means we all
Outer
go
Spain.
back to the earth. We all fall down.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. And I never knew
Jackie.
that either. I
Wow.
mean, I never.
Well, what is it?
She's
The
thinking
one with
about
the
all of them
mulberry.
now.
The one with the mulberry bush. What is that? Oh my gosh.
Gosh, I haven't. I know the one you're talking about, but
Oh
I
my
haven't heard that one in
lord.
so long.
Um,
I don't
crap.
know.
My kids are all big. My
Right?
baby's 15. I
Yeah.
haven't had to do any of those crazy things in years. What is it?
Here we
See, that's gonna drive me back crazy.
Oh, okay. So Kel says it's about the Black Plague ring around the mulberry
Mhm.
bush. Ugh.
Oh, Ring Around the Mulberry Bush. Something. What was it? Ah,
Let me see. This is gonna drive me crazy if I don't look it up.
I'm trying to. My phone is just not.
Hi, Nita.
course, it's got to have an ad for 15 seconds. Hold on. Skip ad.
Here we go round the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush. Here we go round the mulberry bush so early in the morning. Let's do some fun exercises. First, wiggle your fingers. This is the way we wiggle our fingers, wiggle our fingers, wiggle our fingers. This is the way we wiggle our fingers so early in the morning. Now, turn your
Well,
head.
that's not the one I was thinking it was. But that
That's
is.
exercise.
Yeah, hang on. Mulberry
Wiggle
bush.
your fingers and wiggle your toes.
I listen. I am unprepared. That's nothing.
That's the newest version.
It probably is. Let's see.
Okay, supposedly this is saying there's some controversy on what that one actually means. This one is saying that it had to do with female prisoners that exercised around a mulberry bush tree in the moonlight whenever they were in prison.
Wow.
But like I said, there is some controversy on where it actually originated from.
Huh. Well, that's
I believe that was
interesting.
during the 18th and 19th century.
But is that the one that talks about Pop Goes the Weasel? What is that one? Is that the mulberry bush one?
Looking.
Lucy Lockett. What's Lucy Lockett?
Oh, come on.
Mary, Mary, quite contrary is about the homicidal nature of Queen Mary I.
Wow.
That's interesting.
I really thought that was about a spider.
That is interesting.
No, that's Little Miss Muffet, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Little Miss Muffet is actually a dark one if you think about the words of it.
Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider, sat down beside her. And what's the rest?
Frightened Miss Muffet away.
Oh, that's right. See?
But I think there's a part in Little Miss Muffet, the spider asks, "How does your garden grow?" with something little something.
And something all in a row. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I didn't study nursery rhymes today, so I don't know.
It dates back to the 16th century. Has two possible meanings. The 16th century. Wow. Let me click on this. The nursery rhyme of Little Miss Muffet dates back to the late 16th century. We have come across two possible meanings of this rhyme. One is simply about a young girl eating and being frightened by a bug. The other links to the character in the rhyme to be to real people prominent in the 16th century English history. In the first version, Little Miss Muffet was a small girl whose name was Patience Muffet. Her stepfather, Dr. Thomas Muffet, 1553 to 1604, was a famous entomologist, someone who studies insects, and he wrote the first scientific catalog of British insects. Well, that's not too scary. In the second version, it is claimed that the nursery rhyme refers to Mary Queen of Scots, 1542 to 87, who was said to be frightened by the minister and religious reform. I mean, I don't know that that's
Maybe I'm
necessarily.
thinking of a different one, but there's one that's something about how does your garden grow, and it says I almost want to say it says
Didn't
like with
that
little
Jack and Jill
boys
go up the hill?
something.
Is that Jack and Jill or Humpty Dumpty? Shit, I don't know. Oops, sorry. My bad. Family friendly. Sorry, Jack.
It's okay. How is Jack and Jill bad? I mean,
I
Grimm.
don't,
Hey,
I don't
hey,
know. See, we should
Grimm.
have done nursery rhymes too. Let's circle back around and we can do nursery rhymes another time. Jen, tell us about another Grimm's fairy tale.
How about
Let's talk about, I like this one. I like this one because a lot of times we talk about spirit and those in the afterlife having unfinished business, right?
Okay.
And so I like this story because it's actually a really sweet, cute story. It's called The Stolen Farthings, and farthings are just a coin, right? They're what they used for money back then.
Right.
So there's a family that's having they're having lunch, and they have a guest come over, and the guest comes over, and he can see a young child. And now what's interesting is it never says the sex of the child, which I think is interesting because I refer to it as a little boy, but the book never says, the story never says. Anyway, he sees this young child, very pale faced, dressed all in white. And he asks the family, who is that? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't see it. What do you mean? So he just kind of dismisses it. He comes to lunch the next day and he sees the child again. And again, he asks, and they don't know what he's talking about. So he comes to lunch again. This time, he gets up to follow this child because he's very curious. He can see this child. So he gets up and he follows this child into a room. And the child's doing something with the floorboards, really looking for something. When the child looks up and sees him, he leaves. He disappears. And so this guest comes out and he tells the family, look, like I saw this guy, I saw this kid, I saw this child. And he got a really good look at him and he says, this is what he looks like. So the mother recognizes him at that time and says, that's my child that died last month, like just died a month ago. That's my child. So they go into the room where this child was, and they start looking at the floorboards where this man says, he was digging around here. So they pull up the floorboards and they find two of these farthings or two of these coins hidden there. And this child, his mother had given them to him. His mother had given them to him a while ago and said, I want you to give these to somebody poor. These are for charity. I want you to hand these out. Well, the child, being a child, decided he was going to hang on to them and buy something for himself, right? He was going to buy himself a treat. So he hid them under the floorboards. So this spirit is trying to come and find those. The spirit of the child wants to find those and wants his mother to know. Once the family finds these coins and the mother goes and actually gives them to a poorer person and donates them as they were meant to be, they never see this spirit again. It's the end of the story. And I think that's just this beautiful, amazing story about, I love that story. That one wasn't scary to me. It's actually listed as one of the most scary stories. I think it's one of the most beautiful stories in the book.
It is, because it was a spirit needing something to be done to have closure.
Yes.
Essentially.
That's
So,
right.
which any of us that work in the paranormal field or even have a passion for it, that's typically what we want. If they want to tell us their story, if they need something done, need something relayed, need something spoken,
Right.
whatever, that's what we're there to do.
I also found it interesting how the family could not see the child in spirit. Not a lot of time had passed, but a stranger was able to recognize it. And I find that a lot in my work. I mean, we find that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're in such deep states of grief. They're not able to recognize the signs. They're not able to see when they come in. And this story to me was like the perfect example of that. A stranger was able to see it first. And then once he described, this is what this child looks like, the mother knew instantly. And when they
Yes.
found those coins, she knew instantly what her child was doing. He's trying to give these, you know, these coins away. But there again, we come to coins as signs from spirit. From thousands of years ago, the story has been passed down.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's
That
why
is
it's one of my
interesting.
favorites. It's not too disturbing.
No, and it's not scary.
No, it's not
It's
scary.
it's and then I don't remember who it was I was talking to the other day, but we were talking about the paranormal field and spirits being around and that being a haunting, but a haunting doesn't necessarily mean something bad or negative. So I
No.
don't know that I necessarily like the word haunting because people correlate that with something bad or dark or even negative in nature when in reality when I hear haunting I don't think bad, I don't think negative, I just think of a spirit or spirits that are there,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, and I do the same. I don't think negative. I think that word just has a negative connotation to it.
Exactly. We need to come up with a new word.
We
Think
do.
about it, ladies. We'll start a new trend.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. So, if we talk about the robber bridegroom, this is another story that's intensely dark and disturbing. But for me, I see elements in it from clear back again, right? Spirit guides, of guardian angels, of people trying to warn us of things, of not listening to our intuition. And this is a story, the robber bridegroom, where all throughout the story, and I believe one of them is a bird, one of them is in bird form, that's telling her, go away. Go away. But she doesn't listen. And so I see all of those, I see all of those things in all of these stories, which I think is fascinating to me.
They are, and it's just it's a combination of, I think, a connection to not only just life lessons but the afterlife and
Yeah.
spiritual connections and life lessons for those who are going through grief,
Yes, absolutely.
because that can be difficult, very difficult.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know. Which one did you read? Does anyone know any of them? Any stories?
Well, like I said, I have the
I know a
actual
lot of them. I could
book.
keep going, but if you guys know them, tell us.
Listen,
I want to hear your
Like
stories.
I said earlier, I know the Disney version, and the Disney
Yes.
version is not the correct one for this platform.
No,
Hi,
no.
Irene.
Okay, so let's talk
Thank
about that. Let's talk about something else that these all have in common that I think is weird, and even the Disney versions. Since this is a women's show, let's talk about how the women are prized for their beauty and basically nothing else.
Yep.
Their beauty and the way that they can clean. Like, seriously, that is also a theme throughout these stories. The prince wanted the princess because she was more beautiful than the sun. I mean, it says things like that, where she was the most
Or
beautiful.
the wicked stepmother
he
didn't
wanted-
like, or
Right.
the wicked stepmother didn't like it because she was the prettiest. The
Yes.
stepdaughter was.
That's where the women's value lies in these stories, which also is kind of crazy to me. And then, of course, a man is going to rescue her, right? In our new Disney versions, which is gross
Yes.
to me. But whatever, that's the way that they've chosen to rewrite them to make them less scary. And I think they're more terrifying when they have to have that as an ending. I don't know.
So
I
in the
want to see
Grimms, in the Grimms, the prince don't come save her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they still do. Okay, I'm confused.
I mean, why don't they have one where the princess saves herself? Like, that would be the most amazing fairy tale ever.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Right? But they don't, they're still lacking. They're lacking.
They need that prince. The
Yeah.
dreaming of the prince
Right.
still has that fairy tale.
But you know, the
Happy
whole
ending.
thing, These have been handed down from, like we said, generation to generation, thousands of years ago. And of course, this is my personal opinion. Why change it? Why change it?
I don't know. And I don't know when
It
they started
proves,
to change.
well, it shows, I think it does what it intends to do. It shows the afterlife. It shows that things can be scary. Things don't always turn out happy. It
Right.
almost portrays real life in a way. And sometimes in real life, you do have a man that comes and rescues you. Sometimes in real life, you rescue yourself. Sometimes you don't get rescued. So why even change it? Why go and change something that is teaching basically a life lesson, and for people to sit and actually take it in and do what we're doing, explore what it means? And I understand Disney is for kids, and that's why they've took them and changed them for kids. I get that. But to change them at all just seems like almost an injustice to
To the
where
history.
they came from.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
To the
Yes.
origin of the story. Yeah. And I agree.
Yeah.
So I find those interesting. There's one story in here that is a paragraph long, and it's called The Willful Child. Um, and I like that story too. I like that story too because it's basically about a willful child. She has her own will, right? She wants to do things her own way, and she dies, even from the
Hmm.
grave. Her hand is coming up out of the grave. She's that willful. And I mean,
Hmm.
it's a paragraph. It just talks about how she was so willful in life, she couldn't be controlled. She wanted to do her own thing. And from beyond the grave, her hand would reach out. That's
Wow.
another one that I love. One paragraph
Hmm.
that I love.
Do you have it in front of you, Jen?
I don't. It's in this book, but I don't.
You don't
Let me
know
see.
where it's at in the book?
I could look. The table of contents, oddly enough, isn't in alphabetical order.
Yeah, I know.
So let me see if I can find it.
Because I think that'd be a good story to kind of end on, if you can find it.
Yeah, here it is. But can I read it without my glasses? That's not whether I can find it, it's whether I can read it. So, I mean, okay. It doesn't really have the happiest ending, but we're going to read it anyway because I think that it's beautiful.
Right.
Once upon a time, there was a child who was willful and would not do what her mother wished. For this reason, God had no pleasure in her and let her become ill, and no doctor could do her any good. And in a short time, she lay on her deathbed. When she had been lowered into her grave and the earth was spread over her, all at once her arm came out again and stretched upwards. And when they had put it in and spread fresh earth over it, let's see, it was all to no purpose, for the arm always came out again. Then the mother herself was obliged to go to the grave and strike the arm with a rod. And when she had done that, the arm drew in, and then at last the child had rest beneath the ground. Isn't that just, it gives me the chills. Because even beyond the grave, the child was being willful, right? And she was probably, this is the way I look at it, told her whole life that she wasn't obeying God, that she was doing all of these things, and that was the reason that she got sick, was because she had a will and a mind of her own. And even beyond the grave, she reaches her hand out, and her mother continues
To push her
I mean,
down. Yeah,
yeah,
Wow.
that's deep.
I
It
know. And it
is.
just shows to me, I like it, even though it's like sad, but it just shows to me the power of the spirit, the power of the soul. And
Yeah,
so that's why I really like that story.
yeah. Well, and the one thing to keep in mind is I mean, how many parents do we know that have not necessarily pushed their hand back in the grave because that don't happen anymore, but
Right.
how many parents have suppressed children based on just not wanting to deal with them, based on just because they won't be unseen and unheard because that's not who they are. That's not who they're designed to be. And the
Right.
parents won't accept that. And, they may be abusive or neglectful to the child. I mean, that happens on a daily basis. I would say
Mhm.
it's better. Oh, Lord. Kevin, that's a story for another time. This is a family friendly show. I'm sure Howard already told you. Um, but see, now I lost my train of thought. Y'all are bad. You're just bad. God, Howard Petrie
He said it earlier. You
stirring
didn't
the
see
pot.
Howard's comment? What happened to
I
your
did, but
face?
I ignored it because he knows what happened to my face.
I don't see
Well,
nothing
I
wrong with it.
remember. I
Yeah,
remember the rhyme. It's Little Miss
Bruce,
Mary. How does your
is it
garden
right
grow?
here?
That's the rhyme. We'll
yeah.
talk about that next week. But that's the rhyme that I was thinking about. It's not Little Miss Muffet. I just had to say that.
Anita's talking about The Little Mermaid ended like that as well. I will tell you, The Little Mermaid was the most terrifying story to me growing up. It terrified me. Like I said, these were the stories that my dad read to me. He read to me from this book, and I can still see the book. It was a Hans Christian Andersen, and that's where The Little Mermaid was in. And that story terrified me because the one thing that I remember the most was whenever her legs went into a tail and then back. It was talking about like the excruciating pain, and it was talking about this huge sacrifice that she was making. And what Anita is saying is, yeah, to help the spirit of the mermaid ascend to heaven, children had to be well behaved and happy. That terrified me when I was little because those were my bedtime stories. So maybe that's why I have such a fascination with
What
them.
was it? Did your dad grow up on those stories? So he was giving those stories to you too?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I would assume that he did. I just know that those are the stories. I can remember being very small, very small. And it honestly was these stories or Bible stories. That's what we would read. That's what he would read to us at night.
Hmm.
Yes, Pocahontas is another one
Yep.
that's been twisted into this like love story that was not.
Didn't she end up falling in love with him? I know they stole her, but didn't she end up falling in love with him?
I don't know. I'm not super familiar with that
I'd have to
story.
look that story up. That's interesting, Joanne, though. Steven said, yep, I thought so. Definitely interesting.
Well, I have to get that book. I mean, that's some interesting reading.
It is.
I
It
mean,
is. And it's
it,
it's it's,
and
it's eye
some
opening.
it's like about what about I had it written down. I could tell you in a minute, but it's about different things like
Yeah.
how you deal with stuff, how I mean, and stuff like that, right? That's the purpose of it.
Yeah. Do you want to
Try
hear
and get
one more that's a paragraph long
Sure.
that has a little paranormal feel to it
Sure.
before we leave? Okay. So this one is called The Rose. There was once a poor woman who had 2 children. The youngest had to go every day into the forest to fetch wood. Once, when she had gone a long way to seek it, a little child who was quite strong came and helped her to pick up the wood and carry it home. And then, before a moment had passed, the strange child disappeared. The child told her mother this, but at first the mother would not believe it. At length, she brought a rose home and told her mother that the beautiful child had given her this rose and had told her that when it was in full bloom, he would return. The mother put the rose in water. One morning, her child could not get out of bed. The mother went to the bed and found her dead, but looking very happy. On the same morning, the rose was in full bloom. That's it. That's the end of the story.
Leaves you hanging. Leaves you hanging.
Now, see,
Yeah.
with that
Well,
story there, that one
came and
actually
took her.
gave me cold chills
Yes, he came and took her.
because exactly, was it a little boy? Was it a spirit? Was it an angel? What actually
Yeah.
was it? But whatever it was, they knew it was going to be her time when that flower bloomed.
Yes.
So, yeah, I like that one.
Joanne, to answer your question, Stockholm syndrome is what you're
Oh,
talking about.
yes. Yeah.
But I like that story too, though. I mean,
Yeah.
it it leaves it to interpretation. You know
Yes.
what did happen?
But there definitely something supernatural, right?
Definitely,
Strange
definitely.
child in the woods comes and says, "Here's a rose.
Yeah,
I'll be back when it blooms."
right. I
Definitely
mean,
was.
Well, and Reese just made a good point too. I was also thinking that could that have been death appearing as a small child so that the other child wasn't scared.
could have been,
Ben.
could have been.
Wow.
Because
Yep.
let's face it, I mean, death in and of itself is not bad. Death is neutral. Death has one job, and that is to collect that
Hmm.
soul. You know,
Yes. And like the first story, does not discriminate.
exactly. When
At
your time
all.
is up, your time is up. That's it. That's what I'm saying. They're not good, they're not bad, they just are.
Mhm.
So I mean, maybe I would say that there's more than one death that goes and collects souls on the grand scheme of things. Do you think that maybe a child who has passed on could be granted that role? Is that feasible?
Why
Never
wouldn't it
really
be?
thought about it, but I don't see why not. Just like Crystal was saying, to come in the
Children,
form that comforts a child and makes a child feel comfortable and that a
right?
child can relate to. I don't see why that couldn't be. And like I said,
Thought,
never even thought about it, but yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
Cool.
I mean,
interesting.
if you really want to get into it, I mean, when, death comes to take all of us, how is it going to appear? Is it going to appear as a scary figure, or is it going to appear as something that you would accept, that you would not be scared of?
I would hope, and I mean, of course we don't know, but I would hope that
Right.
it's in the form of something that offers you comfort.
It is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it's different. And I believe it appears different for everyone.
right.
Hmm.
I hope so.
Hey, I'm just going with it is. That gives me comfort.
There you go.
From my experience with spirit, it is. And I don't know any different from my experience. So yes.
So
And
we're
I
going
think
to hold fast to that.
yeah, and Rita and Crystal
Right.
are right. They're less frightened by other children. They can relate. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yep.
Jackie, it's 8 o'clock.
7 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock.
8 o'clock my time.
It's 6 o'clock.
All right. That was interesting.
Yeah.
I would have to really go find that book, and we would have to come back on this topic again, especially nursery rhymes.
Like
That
you
was
can buy like the digital copy for a couple bucks. I mean, and download it if you have an iPad or
Yeah.
a notepad or computer. You can download the book.
yes. That's it. Mine comes as my grandmother when I was lying in that cemetery, and so that was a good one. I loved it. I loved it. We have to do it again. I will try and get that book or read something about because that very interesting. But
It is.
that's the end of our show, and I would like to say have a great week, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Peace, love, and kindness, y'all.
Bye.